The jungle was dying around them. 12 Navy SEALs, America's most elite warriors, pressed themselves into the mud of a shallow depression that was rapidly becoming their tomb. Bullets chewed through the vegetation above their heads with sounds like angry hornets, shredding leaves and bark into a green mist that hung in the humid air. Chief Petty Officer Wade Merrick made himself as small as his 6'1" frame would allow, his face pressed against a moss-covered log that smelled of rot and earth. His radio crackled with the kind of desperation that 20 years in special operations had taught him to recognize as a prelude to death. Viper 6, this is Ground Team Alpha. We need immediate air support. We need QRF. We need anything. We are getting massacred out here. The response was not what he wanted to hear, not even close. Ground Team Alpha, no air assets available. Heavy weather systems. QRF is 43 minutes out. You need to hold your position. 43 minutes. They would all be dead in 10. The mission had been textbook until it wasn't. Intelligence said the compound would have maybe 20 hostiles. Light resistance. Militia fighters with AK-47s and delusions of grandeur. In and out before breakfast, back to base for debriefing and bad coffee. But intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. The compound had been a trap, and now his team was surrounded by what looked like an entire battalion of well-trained, well-equipped fighters who knew exactly what they were doing. These weren't farmers with rifles. These were soldiers, professional, disciplined, deadly. Chief, his teammate Reese Keller, shouted over the gunfire, his voice tight with the kind of fear that SEALs almost never showed. We got movement on the left flank. They're trying to surround us completely. Merrick did the math. 12 SEALs with dwindling ammunition against an enemy force that seemed to have unlimited numbers and firepower. The mathematics were simple and brutal and utterly without mercy. They were going to die here in this godforsaken jungle, thousands of miles from home, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He keyed his radio one more time, his voice somehow calm despite the chaos erupting around him. 20 years of training could do that, make you sound professional even when you were staring into the face of oblivion. Viper 6, Ground Team Alpha, if you've got anything, anyone nearby now would be a really good time. There was a long pause, just the crackle of static and the sound of automatic weapons fire tearing apart the jungle. Then a voice he had never heard before came through his earpiece. Female, young, calm as ice water in January. Ground Team Alpha, when have your position. Tell your boys to keep their heads down. This is about to get interesting. Merrick blinked. Who the hell is this? Someone who doesn't miss. Before he could respond, the jungle erupted with a sound he had heard countless times in combat. The distinctive crack of a precision rifle. Sharp, clean, final. But this wasn't random fire. This was surgical. One shot, one kill. The enemy machine gunner who had been tearing apart their position crumpled silently, his weapon going quiet in an instant. Another shot. The spotter next to him dropped like a puppet with cut strings. A third shot. The enemy commander coordinating the assault fell backward, a neat hole where his forehead used to be. What in the name of... Keller whispered, his voice filled with something between awe and disbelief. Merrick stared into the dense jungle, trying to locate the shooter. Whoever she was operating at a level he had rarely seen. Each shot was finding a target his team couldn't even see, through the vegetation, eliminating threats, with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. The voice came through again, that same ice-water calm. Ground Team Alpha 1, count 27 hostiles in your immediate engagement area. Give me 90 seconds, and whatever you do, don't shoot the person coming from your 6 o'clock. That's me. 27 hostiles. She was planning to drop 27 enemy fighters. Alone. Keller looked at Merrick with wide eyes. Chief, is this real? Dead and hallucinating. If we're dead, I'm okay with this particular afterlife, Merrick muttered. Then louder into the radio. Unknown friendly, we copy. You are cleared hot. And ma'am, whoever you are, we owe you a drink. Or 12. Save the drinks. Keep your heads down. 52 hours earlier, Bryn Calloway had been sitting in a briefing room at a classified location in rural Virginia, listening to people who had never been in combat tell her how to do her job. At 28, she had learned that this was just part of the game. Let them talk. Let them think they were in charge. Then go do what actually needed to be done. Your role is strictly reconnaissance and observation, the operations officer was saying, pointing at a map of the jungle region with the kind of confidence that came from never having been shot at. His name was Paul DeMarco, 42 years old, career bureaucrat, soft hands that had never held anything more dangerous than a stapler. You'll be inserted 14.3 kilometers from the target compound. Set up an observation post. Monitor enemy activity. Report back. That's it. No direct action unless absolutely necessary for self-defense. Are we clear, Ms. Calloway? Bryn nodded politely, making appropriate notes in her tactical notebook, looking every bit the compliant contractor who would follow orders to the letter. Inside, she was already planning for the moment when those orders would become irrelevant, because she had been doing this work long enough to know that reconnaissance missions in hostile territory rarely stayed reconnaissance missions. The jungle had a way of forcing your hand. Combat had a way of making bureaucrats and their neat little plans completely irrelevant. Her official title was Military Intelligence Contractor, Field Analyst. 3 words that sounded boring enough to make people stop asking questions. Her actual job was significantly more complicated. Bryn was what the intelligence community called a singleton operator. Someone who worked alone deep in denied territory, gathering intelligence that couldn't be obtained any other way. She spoke 4 languages fluently, could navigate by stars alone, and had survived in some of the world's most hostile environments using nothing but her wits and training. But what made her truly exceptional, what made her valuable enough that certain people at certain agencies kept her on speed dial, was her ability with a rifle. Specifically, her ability to hit targets at ranges that most snipers considered impossible. She had learned to shoot from her grandfather, Colonel Holland Calloway, retired Army Ranger sniper instructor, a man who had seen combat in the Gulf War in 1991 and later in the chaos of Somalia in 1993. A man who understood that shooting was 10% technique and 90% understanding, wind distance, and patience. By 15, Bryn was outperforming adult competitors at long-range competitions, putting rounds through targets at distances that made experienced shooters shake their heads in disbelief. By 20, she had been recruited by an organization that officially didn't exist to do work that officially never happened. The briefing ended with the usual warnings about rules of engagement, operational security, and the critical importance of following protocols. Bryn smiled, shook hands with appropriate firmness, and returned to her quarters to prepare. Her gear was already packed. Custom-built rifle broken down into components that fit in an innocuous hiking backpack. Accuracy International AXMC, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, the kind of rifle that could reach out and touch someone at distances that defied belief. Ammunition match-grade rounds, each one hand-selected for consistency. Ghillie suit components that could be assembled from local vegetation. Water purification tablets, emergency medical kit, satellite phone with encryption that would make the NSA jealous, and a sidearm that she hoped she would never need but carried anyway. She studied the maps one more time, memorizing terrain features, identifying potential observation positions, planning primary and alternate routes. The insertion point was in dense triple canopy jungle, the kind of terrain where visibility dropped to meters and navigation became an exercise in dead reckoning and instinct. Something about the briefing bothered her. The numbers didn't add up. Intelligence said 20 to 25 militia fighters, but the satellite imagery showed vehicle capacity for at least 60. The compound's defensive fortifications looked far too sophisticated for a ragtag militia group. Either the intelligence was catastrophically wrong or someone was lying. Neither option was particularly comforting. She pulled out a small photograph from her tactical vest. 4 people in combat gear standing in front of a C-130 cargo plane. 3 of the faces had been scratched out with a knife, deep gouges that had nearly torn through the photo paper. Only Bryn's face remained untouched. Operation Sandstorm. 3 years ago, Syria, her team, her family, all dead because she had followed orders instead of trusting her instincts. Team leader Morgan Hale. Smart, tough, the kind of operator who inspired loyalty just by walking into a room. Dead at 29. The other 2 specialists whose names she whispered to herself every night before sleep. Dead at 31 and 26, all because Bryn had been at an overwatch position 600 meters away when they needed her, and she had hesitated 8 seconds too long when Morgan had ordered her to take a shot that would have compromised her position. 8 seconds. That's all it took for reinforcements to arrive, for her team to be overrun, for her entire world to collapse. Morgan's last transmission still played in her nightmares. Bryn should have trusted your instinct. Tell my, then just static. Bryn hadn't worked with a team since, hadn't trusted anyone since. Singleton operator wasn't just her job description. It was her entire life philosophy now. Teams died. She survived. That was the math, brutal and simple. She tucked the photo back into her vest along with a challenge coin from Operation Sandstorm. Heavy, bronze, engraved with their unit designation and the date that had changed everything. The helicopter insertion was scheduled for 147 hours. Low and fast, using terrain to mask their approach. No lights, just the pilot's night vision and skill to avoid detection. Bryn had done this dozens of times, but it never got routine. Every insertion carried the risk of compromise, of enemy fire, of mechanical failure that would send them spiraling into the jungle canopy. But this one went smoothly. The helicopter flared just long enough for her to jump into waist-high grass, then disappeared into the night, the sound of its rotors fading quickly into the ambient jungle noise. She was alone, 14.3 kilometers from the target, in a country that would deny she existed if she got caught. Perfect. The jungle at night was alive with sound, insects that clicked and buzzed, animals that rustled through undergrowth, the whisper of wind through leaves. Learning to distinguish natural sounds from human-made ones was a skill that took years to develop and seconds to lose if you got complacent. Bryn moved through the darkness with practiced silence, using terrain and vegetation to mask her movement, stopping frequently to listen to scents to ensure she wasn't walking into an ambush. It took her 7 hours to cover the 14.3 kilometers to her planned observation post. Slow, careful movement, avoiding trails where enemy patrols might be, avoiding areas where humans might congregate, staying in the densest vegetation where her presence would be harder to detect. The jungle was a living thing that tried to kill you in 1,000 small ways. Thorns that tore at exposed skin, vines that caught your feet, insects that carried diseases with names you couldn't pronounce, heat that drained you even at night, humidity that made every breath feel like drowning. But Bryn had learned to love the jungle. It kept her hidden. It kept her safe. It was honest in its hostility, unlike the bureaucrats back in Virginia, with their neat little briefings and their catastrophically wrong intelligence. She found her position on a ridgeline overlooking the valley where the target compound sat. Perfect sightlines, natural cover, multiple escape routes if things went sideways. She assembled her rifle with movements so practiced they were nearly automatic. Barrel, bolt, magazine, scope, each component locked into place with satisfying clicks. Then she constructed a hide using local vegetation, building a small cocoon that would make her nearly invisible to anyone more than 20 meters away. As dawn broke over the jungle, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Bryn settled into position and raised her scope to her eye. What she saw made her blood run cold. The compound below was far more active than intelligence had suggested. She counted carefully, methodically, the way her grandfather had taught her. 67 fighters, not 20. 67, and they were well armed. PKM machine guns, RPG-7 rocket launchers, Dragunov sniper rifles. The kind of weapons that suggested professional military training, not militia amateurs. They were disciplined, conducting patrols with professional precision, maintaining proper spacing, using hand signals, moving with the kind of coordination that took months of training to develop. This wasn't a ragtag militia. This was a trained military force. Something was very, very wrong here. She reported her observations through the encrypted satellite phone, speaking in brief coded phrases that conveyed essential information without revealing details if the transmission was intercepted. Observation post established. Enemy strength 67 personnel, not 25 as briefed. Professional military equipment and discipline. Recommend mission abort and reassessment. The voice on the other end acknowledged her report with the kind of calm that suggested they either didn't believe her or didn't care. Acknowledge Guardian 1. SEAL team insertion proceeds as scheduled. Continue observation and reporting. Bryn felt the first stirring of unease coil in her stomach like a snake. Something was wrong here. The intelligence didn't match reality. The enemy was far stronger than anticipated. The SEALs were walking into a situation that could go catastrophically bad very quickly. But she wasn't in command. She was just the observer. She had done her job by reporting. What happened next was someone else's decision. Except she couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching a disaster unfold in slow motion, and nobody was listening to her warnings. Through her scope, she studied the enemy fighters more carefully. Most looked local, young men with the hard eyes of soldiers who had seen combat. But one figure stood out, taller than the others, moving with absolute confidence, giving orders that were obeyed instantly. She adjusted her scope's magnification, bringing the figure into sharp focus. Her heart stopped. She knew that face, had seen it 2 years ago through a different scope in a different country. Viktor Lazarov, former Russian Spetsnaz, one of the best tactical commanders she had ever encountered. A man who had nearly killed her in Estonia during an operation that was supposed to have been routine. They had faced each other across 800 meters of frozen forest, sniper versus sniper. A duel that had lasted 4 hours and ended only when Bryn had used a ruse that gave her exactly 3 seconds to escape. He was supposed to be in Eastern Europe, working as a mercenary trainer, far away from Central American jungles. What was he doing here? Bryn's unease transformed into full-blown alarm. Victor didn't do small operations, didn't waste his time on militia groups. If he was here, it meant this was something far bigger than the briefing had suggested. She keyed her satellite phone again. Guardian 1 to control. Enemy commander identified as Viktor Lazarev, former Spetsnaz. High-value target. This is not a militia operation. Repeat, this is professional military operation with experienced command. Acknowledge Guardian 1. SEAL team insertion proceeds as scheduled. Control, are you hearing me? This is a trap. You're sending them into a Guardian 1. You are to observe and report. SEAL team has been briefed on updated intelligence. They are proceeding. Continue observation. Control out. The line went dead. Bryn stared at her phone, a cold dread settling into her bones. They knew. Command knew this was a trap and they were sending the SEALs anyway. Why? What possible reason could justify sending 12 of America's most elite warriors into a kill zone against a professional military force led by Viktor Lazarev? She thought about Morgan Hale, about Operation Sandstorm, about how her team had walked into what they thought was a routine operation and found something else entirely, about how she had followed orders and watched them die. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory, a lesson from when she was 12 years old learning to shoot at his ranch in Montana. Distance keeps you alive, Bryn, but sometimes the cost of staying alive is watching good people die. You need to decide what kind of person you want to be, the one who survives or the one who saves. She had asked him what he had chosen. He had looked at her with eyes that had seen too much that carried ghosts he would never talk about. I chose survival. Spent 40 years alone because of it. Don't make my mistake, kiddo. Now watching through her scope as the sun climbed higher and the compound below continued its military routines, Bryn made a decision. If this went wrong, if the SEALs walked into a trap, she wasn't going to follow orders and watch them die. Not this time. Never again. The SEAL team insertion happened the following night at 03:12 hours. Bryn watched through her thermal scope as the helicopters came in fast and low, dropping the 12-man team at the edge of the jungle before disappearing back into the darkness. She could track their movement through the dense vegetation, their infrared signatures visible through her thermal imaging. 12 operators moving with the confident precision of warriors who had done this 1,000 times. Chief Wade Merrick leading. She could tell by the way he moved the way others oriented to him, a natural leader. And there slightly behind and to the right, a younger operator who moved with the careful precision of a designated marksman. That would be Reese Keller, according to the operational brief she had memorized. 32 years old, expert marksman, known for being skeptical of anything that sounded too good to be true. Smart man. The assault on the compound was textbook. Breaching charges, blowing doors with controlled explosions. Flashbangs disorienting defenders with light and noise. Controlled pairs of gunfire taking down targets with professional efficiency. The SEALs were doing everything right. Every single thing. And then the trap sprung. Hidden positions around the compound opened fire simultaneously. Machine guns that had been carefully concealed. RPG teams that had been waiting with the patience of spiders. Mortar crews that dropped rounds with pre-registered coordinates. The compound had been bait and the SEALs had taken it. Now enemy forces were pouring in from multiple directions, trying to surround and destroy the American team. Bryn watched the SEALs fighting their way out, moving with desperate speed toward a defensible position. They were good, incredibly good. Moving with the kind of coordination that comes from years of training and combat experience. But they were outnumbered at least 6-1, maybe more. Enemy fighters kept appearing from the jungle, an endless stream of armed men moving to encircle the SEAL team. She heard the radio traffic, the desperate calls for support, the grim acknowledgement that help was too far away. This was the moment when she was supposed to stay hidden, maintain her position, preserve her cover. She was reconnaissance, not direct action. Getting involved would compromise her mission and potentially her life. Morgan's voice whispered in her memory. Should have trusted your instinct. Bryn made her decision in about 3 seconds. The hell with that, she muttered, settling deeper into her firing position. She had been calculating ranges since the assault started, identifying priority targets, planning her engagement sequence. The SEALs were roughly 800 meters away, taking cover in a shallow depression ringed by fallen logs. Enemy forces were closing from three directions using fire and maneuver tactics that showed sophisticated training. Her first target was the machine gun team on the left flank. They were pouring fire into the SEAL position, keeping the Americans pinned down while other fighters moved to flank. She could see the gunner and his assistant through her scope, both partially concealed behind a fallen tree. Professional setup. Good fields of fire. Too bad they didn't know she was there. Bryn controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate slow, feeling the wind on her face, calculating the correction needed for distance and wind drift. The jungle was humid, which would affect bullet trajectory. The slight breeze was moving right to left. She needed to aim high and left to compensate. 823 meters. Wind correction 2.1 milliradians left. Elevation correction sufficient for drop. She could feel the mathematics in her bones the way her grandfather had taught her, not just knowing the numbers but feeling them, understanding them at a level that went beyond conscious thought. She exhaled slowly and pressed the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with familiar force. Through the scope, she saw the machine gunner's head snap back, his body going limp. The assistant gunner froze for a critical second, trying to understand what had just happened. That second was his last. Bryn's second shot dropped him before he could react, before he could warn anyone, before he could do anything but die. She transitioned to the next target, smoothly, mechanically. An enemy squad leader coordinating the assault on the right flank. He was using hand signals to direct his men, positioning them for a final push that would overrun the SEAL position. Bryn put a round through his chest at 791 meters. He fell and his squad's coordination immediately deteriorated into confusion. That's when she keyed her radio and announced herself to the SEALs. The response was immediate. The enemy forces, confused by fighters dropping with no apparent cause, began to hesitate. Their advance stalled as squad leaders tried to figure out where the fire was coming from. In that moment of confusion, the SEALs began returning fire with renewed aggression, taking advantage of the enemy's disorganization. Bryn worked methodically through her target list. Enemy commanders first. The men giving orders, coordinating movement. Then heavy weapons operators. Machine gunners. RPG teams. Anyone who could inflict mass casualties. Then exposed infantry, who posed immediate threats to the SEAL position. Each shot was deliberate. Each shot accounted for wind distance, humidity, the angle of the slope, the movement of the target. This wasn't spray and pray. This was precision shooting at the highest level. Each trigger pressed the culmination of dozens of calculations and adjustments performed in fractions of seconds. Her fourth target was an RPG gunner preparing to fire into the SEAL position. She shot him as he lifted the weapon to his shoulder. The rocket detonated in place, taking out the gunner and two nearby fighters in a ball of flame and smoke. Fifth target, a spotter directing mortar fire. He was using a radio calling in coordinates that would drop high explosives directly onto the Americans. Bryn's round entered just below his ear. The mortars fell silent. She was operating in a zone of absolute focus, a state where time seemed to slow and every detail became crystal clear. The humid jungle air, the weight of the rifle, the slight tremor in the vegetation that indicated wind direction, the thermal signatures of enemy fighters moving through the dense foliage. 6th through 10th targets fell in rapid succession. An enemy sniper who had been trying to locate her position. A squad leader rallying his men for another assault. 3 fighters setting up a flanking position that would have given them a clear shot at the SEALs. By her 11th shot, the enemy was in complete disarray. They had figured out roughly where the fire was coming from, but roughly wasn't good enough. Bryn was 800 meters away, concealed in dense jungle, firing from a position that gave her clear sight lines while keeping her nearly invisible. Enemy fighters began shooting wildly in her general direction, but their fire was uncoordinated and inaccurate. They were panicking, which was exactly what she wanted. Panicked soldiers made mistakes, exposed themselves, forgot their training. She continued her methodical elimination. Target 12, a fighter with a radio who was probably calling for reinforcements. Target 13, another machine gunner trying to suppress the SEAL position. Target 14, a squad attempting to use smoke grenades to mask their approach. The SEALs, understanding they had a guardian angel, began maneuvering more aggressively. They were laying down suppressive fire, using the enemy's confusion to improve their position, evacuating their wounded. Bryn could hear the relief in their radio traffic, the grim determination replacing earlier desperation. But the fight wasn't over. Enemy reinforcements were arriving, fresh fighters moving in from the main compound. Bryn counted at least 15 more hostiles entering the engagement area, some of them wearing tactical vests and carrying weapons that suggested professional military training. Ground Team Alpha, she transmitted, her voice still calm despite her racing heart. New hostiles inbound from your 3 o'clock. Squad-sized element with possible heavy weapons. Engaging now. She shifted her aim to the approaching reinforcements. These fighters were being more cautious, using cover effectively, advancing with tactical discipline. But caution only went so far against a shooter they couldn't see or locate. Target 15 dropped while trying to cross an open area. Target 16 fell while directing his squad from behind a tree. Targets 17 and 18 went down in quick succession as they exposed themselves to set up a machine gun. Bryn was burning through ammunition now, each shot dropping another enemy fighter, each trigger press removing another threat to the SEAL team. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. Her eyes strained from staring through the scope, but her hands remained steady, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. Target 19 was attempting to flank the SEAL position from an unexpected angle, moving alone through dense vegetation. Bryn tracked him through thermal imaging, waiting until he paused to check his position. One shot. He crumpled silently into the undergrowth. Target 20 tried to rally the remaining fighters, shouting orders, trying to restore some tactical coherence to the disintegrating assault. Bryn's round silenced him mid-sentence. The enemy's will was breaking. She could see it in how they moved. Less aggressive, more defensive, looking for ways to retreat rather than advance. The trap they had set for the SEALs had become their own kill zone, dominated by an invisible shooter who seemed to anticipate their every move. Targets 21 through 23 fell as they attempted to provide covering fire for a retreat. Target 24 went down while trying to recover his dead commander's radio. Target 25, the last immediate threat to the SEAL team, dropped while attempting to maneuver into a position that would have allowed him to engage the Americans. And then suddenly it was over. The surviving enemy fighters were fleeing, abandoning their weapons, disappearing into the jungle. The sustained gunfire that had been constant for the past 8 minutes fell silent, replaced by the normal sounds of the jungle. Insects, birds, the rustle of wind through leaves. Bryn remained in position, scanning for threats, ensuring the enemy wasn't regrouping for another assault. But her thermal scope showed fighters streaming away from the engagement area, their retreat chaotic and disorganized. They had had enough. "Ground Team Alpha," she transmitted. "Hostiles are retreating. Your area is secure. I'm coming to you. Don't shoot me." She could hear the exhaustion and relief in Chief Merrick's response. "Copy that. We see you on thermals. Come ahead." "And ma'am, I don't know who the hell you are, but you just saved 12 lives today." Bryn broke down her hide, carefully policing her brass. Leaving evidence behind was unprofessional. Then she began moving toward the SEAL position. She moved carefully, making noise to announce her presence, keeping her rifle pointed at the ground in a non-threatening manner. The last thing she needed was to survive the battle only to get shot by friendly fire. She emerged from the jungle into the SEAL position to find 12 of America's most elite warriors staring at her like she had just materialized from thin air, which from their perspective, she basically had. Chief Wade Merrick was exactly as she had imagined. Big man, 6'1" of solid muscle with a beard that made him look like a modern Viking. Combat gear covered in mud and blood. Eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. He studied her with professional interest, taking in her compact 5'7" frame, the custom rifle slung across her back, the ghillie suit components still attached to her gear. "You're the shooter?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was still processing what had just happened. "I'm the shooter," Bryn confirmed. "How many did you drop?" 25 confirmed, maybe more. Hard to tell with the ones behind cover. One of the other SEALs, a younger operator with sharp eyes and the careful movements of someone who had taken shrapnel, shook his head in disbelief. "Ma'am, I've been shooting my whole adult life. I'm a designated marksman. And what you just did, that was, I don't even know what to call it." "Just training and practice," Bryn said. "And good timing. You guys were about to have a really bad day." "We were about to have our last day," Merrick corrected. "If you hadn't shown up when you did, we'd be calling for body bags instead of extraction." He extended his hand. "Chief Petty Officer Wade Merrick. Bryn Calloway, military intelligence contractor." She shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip and the genuine gratitude in his eyes. "Contractor." The younger SEAL repeated, his tone skeptical. "That would be Reese Keller. What kind of contractor operates alone in hostile territory and shoots like a Tier 1 sniper?" "The kind that gets hired for situations like this," Bryn replied evenly. She wasn't offended by the skepticism. She had dealt with it her entire career. The assumption that because she was young and female, she couldn't possibly be as skilled as her record suggested. She had learned to let her work speak for itself. Another SEAL approached his movements careful despite obvious pain. "Ma'am, I've worked with some of the best snipers in the military, And what you just did engaging multiple targets at that range in these conditions under stress, that's world class. Where'd you train? Here and there, Bryn said vaguely. The truth was that her training came from multiple sources. Military schools she had attended as a contractor, private instruction from retired special operations snipers, thousands of hours of self-practice, real-world experience in places that never appeared in official records. But that wasn't information she shared casually with SEALs she had just met, no matter how grateful they were. Right now, she continued, we should focus on getting you guys extracted. This area is going to get hot when the enemy regroups and calls for backup. Merrick nodded, already keying his radio. Viper 6 Ground Team Alpha. Hostile contact broken. We are secure for extraction. We also have an additional friendly. One contractor who just saved our asses. We'll need one more seat on the bird. The response came back quickly. Ground Team Alpha, understand additional passenger. Extract birds are inbound. ETA 12 minutes. Move to primary LZ. Roger, moving now. Merrick looked at his team. You heard the man. Let's move. Johnson Ramirez carry the wounded. Everyone else tactical spacing. Watch our flanks. Miss Calloway, you're with me. I want you where I can see you. Not because I don't trust you, he added quickly, but because I don't want to accidentally leave behind the person who just saved our lives. The SEAL team moved through the jungle with professional efficiency. Despite their exhaustion and wounds, despite 2 men being carried, the rest maintained security scanning for threats, ready to engage if the enemy returned. Bryn moved with them, her rifle ready, her eyes constantly scanning. The fight was over, but they weren't safe yet. Plenty of operations had gone wrong in the final moments when exhaustion and relief made people careless. As they moved, she heard Keller speaking quietly to another SEAL. Did you see those shots 800 meters through this jungle? Moving targets. I counted 25 kills in 8 minutes. That's not human. Good thing she's on our side, the other SEAL replied. Bryn smiled slightly. She had heard variations of this conversation before. The disbelief, the awe, the subtle fear that came from watching someone do the impossible. Let them wonder. Mystery was one of her most effective weapons. The landing zone was a small clearing, barely large enough for helicopters. The SEALs spread out in a defensive perimeter, watching the jungle for any sign of pursuit. Bryn took a position that gave her overlapping fire with the team's automatic weapons. If the enemy attacked during extraction, she wanted to be able to support the defensive fire. Contact left, one of the SEALs suddenly shouted. Bryn's rifle was up and tracking before she had consciously processed the warning. Through her scope, she saw 3 enemy fighters emerging from the jungle. Apparently survivors from the earlier battle who had decided to make one last attempt at revenge. Her first shot dropped the lead fighter before he could raise his weapon. The second fighter managed to get off a burst of automatic fire, none of which came close to hitting anything, before Bryn's second shot ended him. The third fighter dove for cover, but Bryn had already calculated where he would land. Her third shot found him as he tried to scramble behind a fallen log. Clear, she called out calmly. The SEAL stared at her. Again, Keller muttered. She does it again. Does she ever miss? Not that I've seen, Merrick replied. And I'm starting to think we need to rethink our definition of contractor. The helicopters arrived moments later, 2 Blackhawks coming in fast and low, their door gunners scanning for threats, ready to lay down suppressive fire if needed. The extraction was textbook. SEALs loading quickly but carefully, ensuring the wounded were secure, doing accountability to make sure no one was left behind. Bryn was last on board, taking a seat near the door where she could provide covering fire if needed. As the helicopter lifted off, banking away from the jungle and accelerating towards safety, she finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Not completely. She never relaxed completely in a combat zone, but enough to acknowledge that the immediate danger had passed, enough to process what had just happened. 25 kills, maybe 28 with the ones at the landing zone, all at ranges that most people would consider impossible, all while operating alone in hostile territory. Just another day at the office. Except it wasn't, because sitting across from her, studying her with an expression that mixed gratitude with professional curiosity, was Chief Wade Merrick. Over the headset, his voice came through clearly, despite the helicopter noise. Miss Calloway, when we get back there, are going to be a lot of people who want to talk to you. Debriefings, after-action reports, probably some medals and commendations. I'd prefer to avoid all of that if possible, Bryn replied. I work better when people don't know who I am or what I do. I get that, but you just saved 12 SEALs. That's not something that goes unnoticed. Then let's compromise. I'll do the debrief for operational purposes, but keep my name out of official reports. Attribute the support to local assets or intelligence contractor or whatever vague term works. I'm more effective when I'm not famous. Merrick considered this. I can probably make that happen, but my team knows who you are, and they're going to tell this story. Maybe not with your name attached, but they're going to tell it because what you did today. That's the kind of thing that becomes a legend. The mysterious sniper who appeared out of nowhere and single-handedly turned a massacre into a rescue. As long as the legend doesn't include my actual identity, I can live with that, Bryn said. She looked out the helicopter door at the jungle disappearing below them. Somewhere down there, enemy fighters were regrouping, reporting what happened, trying to understand how their perfect ambush had turned into a disaster. Let them wonder. Let them tell stories about the ghost in the jungle who killed with impossible precision. Let Victor Lazarev, if he had survived, spend sleepless nights trying to figure out who had destroyed his carefully laid trap. Because Bryn Calloway had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous operator on any battlefield was the one nobody knew was there. And as the helicopter carried her toward whatever came next, as she sat surrounded by 12 Navy SEALs who were alive because she had broken protocol and followed her instincts instead of orders, she allowed herself a small smile. Morgan Hale's voice whispered in her memory one more time. But this time it wasn't the dying transmission. It was something Morgan had said years ago during training. Trust your instincts, Bryn. Rules are written by people who weren't there. You are. She had finally listened, and 12 warriors were alive because of it. The helicopter banked toward the setting sun, and Bryn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what she had done settle into her bones alongside all the other ghosts she carried. 28 more faces to remember. 28 more lives taken. But also 12 lives saved. Maybe, just maybe, that math would balance out eventually. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. Distance keeps you alive. But sometimes the cost of staying alive is watching good people die. Today she had chosen differently. Today she had closed the distance, and she would live with whatever consequences that choice brought. But then her radio crackled with something unexpected. Victor's voice, thick with accent, and something that might have been admiration or might have been rage. Bryn Calloway, I knew you were here. Estonia taught me your signature. You think you won today? You revealed yourself, and now the real hunt begins. Her blood went cold. He knew her name, her real name. The helicopter continued its flight toward the firebase, but Bryn's moment of peace had shattered into 1,000 pieces. Victor knew who she was, which meant this was far from over. The debriefing took place in a secure facility that officially didn't exist, hidden deep in the jungle, on what the maps called disputed territory, but what everyone knew was a covert operations base. Bryn sat across from Colonel Lachlan Drake, a career intelligence officer with 20 years of experience in special operations and eyes that gave away nothing. Chief Merrick sat to her right, still in his combat gear, refusing to leave until he had personally ensured Bryn received proper recognition for what she had done. Mr. Calloway, the colonel began reviewing the preliminary reports on his tablet. I've been reading Chief Merrick's account of today's engagement. The numbers are frankly hard to believe. 25 confirmed enemy kills from a single shooter at ranges exceeding 800 meters in jungle conditions, while the targets were actively engaged in combat operations. That's accurate, sir, Bryn confirmed. I've been in this business a long time, Ms. Calloway. I've worked with some of the best snipers the military has ever produced. What you're describing, what Chief Merrick is describing, represents a level of marksmanship that approaches the theoretical maximum of what's humanly possible. I had good conditions, sir. Clear sight lines from my position, thermal optics to identify targets through vegetation, and the enemy was focused on the SEAL team, not looking for a threat from my position. Those factors combined to create an ideal engagement scenario. Ideal for you, perhaps. Catastrophic for the enemy. The colonel leaned back in his chair. I need to understand your background, Ms. Calloway. Your file says you're a contractor with intelligence analysis specializations, but what I'm seeing in these reports suggests capabilities more consistent with Tier 1 Special Operations personnel. Before Bryn could respond, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights began strobing in the corridors, casting everything in an eerie crimson glow. The colonel's radio erupted with urgent traffic. Sir, we have a situation. Enemy assault force approaching from multiple vectors. Estimated force strength between 70 and 75 hostiles. They're heavily armed and moving with tactical coordination. Distance to perimeter 800 meters and closing. Bryn saw the color drain from the colonel's face. This facility was supposed to be secret secured by its remote location and careful operational security. An enemy assault here would be catastrophic, not just for the personnel present, but for the intelligence compromise it represented. Maps, communications equipment, personnel rosters, everything that would reveal the extent of American operations in this region. Lock down the facility, Drake ordered, his voice steady despite the crisis. Get everyone armed and in defensive positions. Call for QRF support. Sir, QRF is 25 minutes out minimum. Weather's deteriorating. We might not get air support at all. The colonel looked at his tactical display, watching the red icons representing enemy forces converging on the facility from 3 different directions. How many combat-capable personnel do we have on site? 15, sir, but only 5 have recent combat experience. The rest are support staff, intelligence analysts, translators, communication specialists, medical personnel. Against 70 trained fighters, Merrick said grimly, already checking his weapon. My team's here, but we're down to maybe 60% combat effectiveness. We're wounded, exhausted, and low on ammunition. Bryn was already standing, her mind shifting from debrief mode to combat operations. She moved to the facility's tactical display, studying the terrain, the approach vectors, the defensive positions. Colonel, I need detailed topography of the area surrounding this facility, elevation data, vegetation density, natural choke points. Ms. Calloway, you're a civilian contractor who just completed an exhausting combat operation, who just saved 12 Navy SEALs, and who has capabilities you clearly need right now, Bryn interrupted. Sir, with respect, we don't have time for protocol discussions. That enemy force will be in assault range in 10 minutes. We need to set up a defense, and we need to do it now. Drake hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Show her everything. Miss Calloway, what do you need? Bryn studied the tactical display, her fingers tracing potential firing positions, calculating ranges and angles. The facility was built into a hillside surrounded by dense jungle on 3 sides with a cleared approach on the 4th. Natural choke points where the jungle thinned, high ground positions that would provide clear sight lines. I need to get outside the perimeter, she said. Set up in an elevated position with clear sight lines to the enemy approach vectors. Same tactics as before. I'll engage at long range, disrupt their assault coordination, eliminate high-value targets, buy time for your QRF to arrive. That's a suicide mission, one of the other officers protested. You'll be completely exposed behind enemy lines with no support and no extraction plan. I'll be 900 to 1,000 meters from their assault positions, Bryn corrected, concealed in jungle terrain that I've already scouted, engaging targets from a position they can't easily locate or effectively return fire on. It's not suicide, it's asymmetric warfare. Merrick spoke up. Colonel, I've seen what she can do. If she says she can hold off that assault force, I believe her. My team will hold the facility perimeter. We'll create a defensive kill zone at the cleared approaches. She picks off their leadership and heavy weapons. We handle anyone who makes it through. It's not a great plan, but it's better than getting overrun. The colonel looked at Bryn for a long moment, weighing impossible options against catastrophic consequences. Finally, he nodded. Do it. But Ms. Calloway, if the situation becomes untenable, you extract immediately. We can't afford to lose someone with your capabilities over a facility that can be rebuilt. Understood, sir. Bryn grabbed extra ammunition, checked her gear, and headed for the exit. As she moved past Merrick, he caught her arm. Hey, he said quietly, you don't owe us this. You already saved us once today. Nobody would blame you for sitting this one out. This isn't about owing anybody anything, Chief. There are people in this facility who can't defend themselves. Support staff who never signed up for a firefight. They need someone to keep them safe. That's reason enough. She slipped out through a camouflage side entrance, moving quickly but carefully through the jungle. Behind her, she could hear the SEALs organizing the defense, their voices calm and professional despite the desperate situation. These men had already survived one impossible battle today. Now they were preparing for another. Bryn reached her planned position in less than 5 minutes. A rocky outcrop on a hillside about 920 meters from the facility, elevated 20 meters above the valley floor. The position offered excellent sight lines down into the approaches while providing natural cover from return fire. She constructed a hasty hide using available vegetation, settled into a stable firing position, and began scanning through her scope. The enemy force was larger than initial reports suggested. Through her thermal optics, she counted at least 72 fighters organized into squad-sized elements of 8 to 10 men each, moving with tactical discipline that suggested professional military training. They were using fire and maneuver tactics, maintaining intervals, communicating with hand signals. This wasn't a mob, this was a coordinated military assault, and leading them moving with absolute confidence at the center of the formation was a figure she recognized even at this distance. Viktor Lazarev. Her heart went cold. He was here, personally leading this assault, which meant this wasn't about the firebase. This was about her. She keyed her radio. "Command, this is Overwatch. I'm in position. I count 72 enemy fighters organized in 8 assault squads, plus a command element. They're 300 meters from your perimeter in closing. I'm beginning engagement." "Roger, Overwatch," the colonel responded. "You are cleared hot. Watch your fire. Some of our people might be in forward positions." Bryn identified her first priority target, the overall assault commander distinguishable by his position behind the main force and the cluster of radio operators and officers around him. Victor himself. 920 meters, slight crosswind from the east, high humidity, temperature dropping as the sun set behind the mountains. She adjusted for all variables, let her breathing settle and squeezed the trigger. But in the microsecond before the round left the barrel, Victor moved, stepped to the side to gesture at something. The bullet that should have ended him caught his radio operator, instead dropping the man instantly. Victor and his officers scattered immediately, diving for cover with practiced speed. Bryn didn't give them time to organize. Her second shot took down the nearest officer who tried to take command. Her third eliminated another radio operator who was probably calling for instructions. The enemy assault faltered immediately. Squad leaders looked back toward their command element, seeking guidance that was no longer clearly being given. In that moment of confusion, Bryn shifted her aim to the leading assault elements. Target 4 was a heavy machine gunner setting up to provide suppressive fire. Target 5 was his ammunition bearer. Both dropped within seconds of each other. Target 6 was a squad leader, directing his men into assault positions. Target 7 was an RPG gunner, preparing to fire at the facility. Target 8 was a sniper who had taken position to provide overwatch. He had been scanning the wrong direction, looking for threats from the facility instead of from Bryn's position. By her 10th shot, the enemy assault had completely stalled. Fighters were taking cover, unsure where the fire was coming from, watching their leaders and heavy weapons specialists drop without warning. Some were returning fire, but they were shooting blindly into the jungle, wasting ammunition on empty terrain. Bryn kept working methodically. Target 11 was another squad leader attempting to rally his men. Target 12 was a fighter with a radio, probably trying to call the main force for instructions or reinforcements. Targets 13 and 14 were attempting to flank the facility using a ravine for concealment. Bryn tracked them through thermal imaging, waiting patiently until they emerged from the ravine. Both fell before they could take 3 steps in the open. "Overwatch to command. Enemy assault has stopped advancing. They're taking defensive positions approximately 200 meters from your perimeter. Whatever you're doing, it's working." "Roger, Overwatch. I'm shifting fire to suppress any attempt to reorganize. Stand by." Bryn identified the fighters who were trying to establish a new command structure. She could see them gathering in small groups, leaders attempting to restore order to coordinate a new assault plan. She systematically eliminated anyone who appeared to be giving orders, anyone who was coordinating movement, anyone who was trying to organize the chaos back into a coherent attack. Target 15 was a senior fighter, probably a lieutenant or captain, who had moved forward to take command. Target 16 was a fighter setting up a heavy machine gun on a tripod. Target 17 was another RPG gunner. Target 18 was a sniper who had finally figured out roughly where Bryn's position was and was attempting to locate her for a countershot. She killed him before he could find her. The enemy's assault was dissolving. She could see it in their body language, in how they moved. Less aggressive, more defensive, looking for ways to disengage rather than continue the attack. They had expected to overwhelm a lightly defended facility with a rapid assault. Instead, they were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't locate, couldn't effectively fight. But Bryn knew this wasn't over. Enemy forces this size typically had backup plans. Reserve elements, commanders who wouldn't give up easily. And she was right. "Overwatch to command. We have new contacts. Second enemy force approaching from the east. Estimate 20 fighters moving to flank your position." Bryn swung her rifle to cover the new threat vector. Through her scope, she could see a fresh squad of fighters attempting to use the confusion of the main assault to approach from an unexpected direction. Smart tactics. If they reached the facility's flank, they would have clear shots at the defenders. She couldn't allow that. Target 19 was the squad leader of this flanking element. Target 20 was his second in command. Targets 21 through 23 were fighters carrying heavy weapons, a machine gun, an RPA, and what looked like a demolition charge. All four went down in rapid succession. The flanking element broke immediately. Without leadership or heavy weapons, the surviving fighters scattered into the jungle, their assault abandoned. Bryn tracked them as they fled but held her fire. They were no longer a threat, and she needed to conserve ammunition for the main force. She shifted back to the primary assault force. They were attempting to withdraw, dragging wounded and dead with them, providing covering fire as they retreated back into the jungle. Bryn let most of them go. They were broken, no longer combat effective, but she continued targeting anyone who appeared to be organizing a rear guard or preparing to launch a final attack. Target 24 was a fighter setting up to provide covering fire for the retreat. Target 25 was another squad leader attempting to organize a defensive line. Target 26 was a fighter with a radio who was probably calling for reinforcements or artillery support. Overwatch to command. Enemy forces are withdrawing. Repeat, hostiles are breaking contact and retreating. Assess approximately 30 enemy KIA. Unknown number wounded. You've stopped their assault cold. Bryn continued scanning, watching the jungle, ensuring the enemy wasn't regrouping for another attempt. But her thermal scope showed only fleeing fighters, their retreat disorganized and panicked. The assault was over. But then her radio crackled with a voice she had hoped never to hear again. Bryn Calloway, Victor's voice thick with accent and something that might have been admiration or might have been rage. I knew you were here. The pattern of kills, the precision. Estonia taught me your signature. Her blood went cold. You think you won? You saved your SEAL friends. You saved this facility. But you revealed yourself. I have footage from body cameras. I know your face now. Your tactics. Your timing patterns. Through her scope, she saw a figure emerge from the retreating force, standing in the open, exposed, looking directly at her position even though he couldn't possibly see her. Victor, you should have killed me when you had the chance, he continued. Now I will spend every day hunting you and everyone you care about. Those 12 SEALs, I know their names now, their families, their children. Bryn's finger tightened on the trigger. 940 meters. Clear shot. One round would end this. But something made her hesitate. You won't take the shot, Victor said, as if reading her mind, because you're wondering how I knew, how I found you, how I knew this facility's location. He laughed, a sound without humor. Someone wanted you tested, Bryn Calloway. Someone very powerful. And you passed every test, which means you're valuable, which means I can't kill you yet. But those SEALs, that facility, they're not valuable. He turned and disappeared into the jungle, leaving Bryn with a scope full of nothing and a mind full of questions. Command Overwatch. Enemy has withdrawn. I'm maintaining position until your QRF arrives in case they attempt to regroup. Recommend you stay at heightened alert. Roger, Overwatch. QRF inbound ETA 10 minutes. And Ms. Calloway, I don't know what we did to deserve having you here today, but thank you. You just saved this entire facility. Bryn remained in position, watching and waiting. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. Her eyes were strained from hours of staring through optics, but she stayed alert, ready to engage if the enemy returned. They didn't. 20 minutes later, she heard the distinctive sound of incoming helicopters. The QRF arriving with heavily armed soldiers ready for a major engagement. They found only bodies, a secure facility, and one very tired contractor sitting on a hillside calmly cleaning her rifle. Colonel Drake personally walked out to Bryn's position, accompanied by Merrick and several other officers. His expression was a mixture of awe, gratitude, and complete bewilderment. Ms. Calloway, he said, approaching slowly, I've just reviewed the preliminary casualty assessment. 27 confirmed enemy kills from a single shooter in less than 15 minutes of engagement against a coordinated assault force that should have overrun this facility. 27, sir, Bryn corrected, pointing to a body that had just been discovered in the undergrowth. That one was trying to get close enough to throw grenades. 27, the colonel repeated, shaking his head. I don't have words for this. What you've done today, first saving Chief Merrick's team, now saving this entire facility, it's beyond anything I've seen in 20 years of special operations. Just doing my job, sir. No, Merrick interjected. No, ma'am, this is not just doing your job. I've worked with the best shooters in the SEAL teams, with special operations snipers, who've spent their entire careers perfecting this craft, and none of them could have done what you did today. Not once, and certainly not twice. Reese Keller, who had been examining the enemy casualties, approached with a spent brass casing in his hand. Ma'am, I've been tracking your shots based on the entry wounds and angles. You were engaging targets at ranges from 800 to over 1,000 meters in jungle terrain with limited visibility while they were moving and taking cover. The level of precision required to do that, it's honestly hard to believe, even though I'm looking at the evidence. The conditions were favorable, Bryn said. Good elevation, thermal optics, enemies who weren't aware of my position until it was too late. It wasn't as difficult as it sounds. Bull, another SEAL said bluntly. Ma'am, with respect, I'm a designated marksman. I train on this stuff constantly, and what you're calling favorable conditions would be considered extremely challenging shots by any standard. You're making world record level marksmanship sound routine. The colonel gestured back toward the facility. Ms. Calloway, we need to complete your debriefing, and this time I need your complete background. I need to understand how someone develops the capabilities you've displayed, because what I'm seeing doesn't match any training profile I'm familiar with. They returned to the command center where Bryn spent the next 3 hours walking through both engagements in detail. Her training background, competition shooting from age 8, mentorship from a Gulf War and Somalia veteran sniper, specialized instruction from private contractors, years of operational experience in denied territories. Her methods, extensive preparation, custom equipment, understanding of ballistics and environmental factors. Thousands of practice hours. So you're self-taught, essentially, the colonel said. No formal military sniper school. I've attended several military schools as a contractor, sir, but most of my skill development came from private instruction and self-directed practice. I had the advantage of learning from multiple sources. Military competition, shooting international instructors, synthesizing those different approaches into my own methodology. And your operational experience. Your file lists you as an intelligence analyst. That's my primary function, sir. But intelligence work in denied territories often requires defensive capabilities. I developed those capabilities so I could operate independently in high-risk environments. Merrick spoke up. Colonel, with respect, does it matter where she learned she saved 35 American service members in the last 12 hours? That's results that speak for themselves. It matters because I need to understand if her capabilities can be replicated, the colonel replied. If we can train other operators to this level, or if Miss Calloway represents a unique convergence of natural talent and training that can't be easily reproduced. The latter probably, Bryn said. I had very specific advantages. Started young, had excellent mentorship, access to unlimited practice time and resources. No military bureaucracy constraining my training methods. That combination is hard to reproduce in a military training pipeline. The colonel made notes, clearly thinking about implications, but then his expression changed. Something flickered across his face. Not surprise, but something else. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. He pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Bryn. The screen showed surveillance footage, aerial footage, of both battles, from angles she had never detected, drones she had never seen. Her blood went cold. What is this? This Ms. Calloway is proof that you're exactly what we've been looking for. Drake's voice had changed. Gone was the grateful commander. In its place was something colder, more calculating. What are you talking about? The bad intelligence, Victor Lazarev's presence, the ambush of the SEAL team, the attack on this facility. All of it was orchestrated. All of it was designed to test you. Bryn stood slowly, her hand moving toward her sidearm. The SEALs in the room noticed tensing. You're saying you deliberately sent those SEALs into a trap. I'm saying we identified a situation and leveraged it for maximum intelligence value. Victor was planning an operation. We simply ensured it intersected with assets we wanted to evaluate. Evaluate? Bryn's voice was dangerously quiet. 12 men almost died. But they didn't, because you were there, because you did exactly what we predicted you would do. Break protocol, engage the enemy, save American lives at great personal risk. Operation Sandstorm, Bryn said, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. 3 years ago, my team, that was you too. Drake didn't deny it. Morgan Hale and her team were compromised before insertion. They were dead the moment they landed. But we extracted you because you were valuable, because you had potential we couldn't afford to lose. You killed them to test me. We saved you because of what you could become, what you have become. A Tier 0 operator, someone who can operate completely alone in denied territories, someone who doesn't need backup or support or rules of engagement, someone who just needs a target and will find a way to eliminate it. Bryn's hand was on her weapon now, So were the hands of every SEAL in the room. "Welcome to the Guardian Protocol, Ms. Calloway," Drake said calmly. "You've been recruited." Merrick's voice cut through the tension. "Colonel, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but if you're saying you deliberately endangered my team, I'm saying your team was already endangered, Chief. Victor was coming for that compound whether we intervened or not. We simply ensured that the right asset was in position to save you when the trap sprung, and it worked exactly as designed." Drake produced a file folder, opened it. Inside was a photograph of Bryn's grandfather, Holland Calloway, in his Army Rangers uniform. "Your grandfather was offered the same opportunity in 1994 after Somalia. He refused. Spent the next 26 years looking over his shoulder until the stress killed him in 2020. He warned you away from this life, but you didn't listen. You became exactly what he feared, what we hoped." He produced another document, a letter in her grandfather's handwriting. This was found in his effects after his death. "Read it." Bryn took the letter with shaking hands. The words swam before her eyes, but she forced herself to focus. "Bryn, if you're reading this, it means they found you like they found me. I told them no because I knew the Kestes. 40 years alone, every kill haunting me, every friend I pushed away to keep them safe. But you're stronger than I was. If you must become the weapon they want, if you can't escape it, then do what I couldn't. Find the pack I never did. Don't let the ghosts win. Don't die alone like I'm going to. Love, Grandpa." The letter was dated 2 months before his death. Bryn looked up at Drake, tears in her eyes and murder in her heart. "You had no right. I had every right. Because without the Guardian Protocol, without operators like you, the Victor Lazarovs of the world win." His organization spans 47 countries. Arms networks, warlords, terror cells. "We need ghosts to hunt ghosts. And if I refuse, then you're already exposed. Victor has body camera footage. He knows your face, your tactics. You'll spend your life running from people like him, and everyone you care about becomes a target." Drake gestured to the SEALs. "These men, their families, their children. Victor made that threat, and he'll follow through, unless you help us destroy his network completely." Merrick stepped forward. "Whatever you choose, we're with you. Your pack now." Keller nodded. "Drake's a sociopath, but he's not wrong about the threat. And you saved us. We don't abandon that." Bryn looked at the 12 SEALs who had somehow become something like friends in the span of a single day. Looked at the challenge coin from Operation Sandstorm in her pocket. Looked at her grandfather's letter. She thought about Morgan Hale's last transmission, about Victor's threat, about the choice between safety and purpose. Finally, she lowered her weapon. "I don't join your program, but I'll stop Victor's network. My way. With my team." She pointed to the SEALs. "They're my command structure, not you." Drake smiled. "Acceptable. The Guardian Protocol doesn't require obedience, only results. First assignment, Victor's superior. Codename Maven. Syria. Deep cover. 6-month operation. I need 72 hours first." "Granted, but Ms. Calloway, you should know. Victor escaped custody during transfer 20 minutes ago. Killed 3 guards. He's in the wind, and he's coming for everyone you care about." The room went silent. Bryn looked at Merrick, then at Keller, then at the rest of the team. "Then I guess we have work to do." The medical base smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. Bryn sat on the examination table while a Navy corpsman with gentle hands treated her wounds. Shrapnel extracted from her shoulder. Lacerations cleaned and sutured. Gauze wrapped around her ribs where the explosion had thrown her against rocks. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that had seen too much, reviewed her chart with a deepening frown. "Multiple lacerations, moderate concussion, shrapnel wounds, acoustic trauma from explosions. Your vitals are stable, but your cortisol levels indicate chronic severe stress. Your body's in constant fight-or-flight mode. You're 28 years old, but showing stress markers of a 50-year-old combat veteran." She set down the chart and looked at Bryn directly. "The PTSD indicators are off the charts. You're seeing the faces, aren't you? Everyone you killed today." Bryn said nothing, which was answer enough. "I'm prescribing sleep aids and recommending you speak with our psychiatric staff before you—" "I'll be fine. Ms. Calloway, you've killed 53 people in the last 14 hours. That's not something anyone processes easily, no matter how necessary it was." 53. The number hit Bryn like a physical blow. She had been counting during the engagements, tracking targets, but hearing it stated so clinically made it real in a way combat never did. 53 lives ended by her hand. 53 people who would never go home. The doctor left her alone with instructions to rest, but rest was impossible. The moment the door closed, the faces started appearing. Not hallucinations exactly, but memories so vivid they might as well have been. Every target she had engaged, every kill confirmed through her scope. The machine gunner 24 maybe, who had fallen without ever knowing what hit him. The squad leader who had died mid-sentence. The young fighter who had tried to surrender but had been holding a radio that might have called in artillery. 53 faces. 53 names she would never know. 53 families who would never understand why their son, brother, father hadn't come home. Her grandfather's ghost materialized in her mind with terrible clarity. Holland Calloway in his Army Ranger's uniform, standing in the corner of the medical bay, looking at her with eyes that understood. "Now you know," the ghost said in her grandfather's voice. "They never leave, every single one. I carried 89 for 40 years. You're carrying 53 after one day. How long do you think you'll last?" Bryn's breathing accelerated. Her heart rate spiked. The medical monitors began alarming, but she couldn't hear them over the roaring in her ears. Panic attack. She recognized it clinically even as it consumed her. Hyperventilation, tunnel vision, the overwhelming sense that she was drowning in air. The door burst open. Chief Merrick filled the doorframe, took in the situation instantly, and crossed to her in 2 strides. "Hey! Hey, Bryn! Look at me, Kay!" She couldn't. The faces were everywhere. 53 accusers staring at her with dead eyes. "You're not alone in this," Merrick said, his voice cutting through the panic like a lifeline. "Whatever you're seeing, whatever you're feeling, you're not alone." He sat beside her on the examination table, his presence solid and real in a way the ghosts weren't. "I've been there. Every SEAL has been there. The first time you take a life, it changes you. The 50th time it changes you again. But you know what? You saved 195 people today. Count them, 12 SEALs, 183 support staff here at the firebase. That's what you carry. Not the 53 enemies, or the 195 living." Bryn's breathing slowly returned to normal. The faces receded, not gone, but manageable. For the first time since Morgan Hale's death 3 years ago, she leaned into someone else's shoulder and let herself be human. Let herself be vulnerable. Let herself accept comfort instead of maintaining the distance that had kept her alive but utterly alone. Merrick said nothing, just sat there, a solid presence in a world that had become untethered. "I see their faces," Bryn whispered. "Every single one." "Good," Merrick said, surprising her. "That means you're still human. The day you stop seeing them is the day you become something else. Something dangerous. How do you live with it? You don't live with it. You live despite it. You remember that every trigger you pulled saved someone else. You remember that war is full of impossible choices, and you made the ones that kept your people alive." Morgan used to say something like that. My old team leader, before I got her killed. Merrick pulled back to look at her directly. "The colonel told me about Operation Sandstorm. What happened wasn't your fault. You were set up. They were compromised before insertion." I hesitated. She ordered me to take a shot, and I hesitated because I was worried about compromising my position. 8 seconds. That's all it took for everything to fall apart. And today you didn't hesitate. You broke protocol, engaged the enemy, saved 12 men who would have died otherwise. Morgan's death taught you something. You honored her by using that lesson to save lives. Bryn looked at the challenge coin in her hand. Operation Sandstorm. Morgan Hale's name engraved on the back along with the other 2 team members. She told me once that I was stronger in a pack. I didn't believe her. Thought she was wrong. Spent 3 years proving I could survive alone. And you did survive. But surviving isn't the same as living. Pack means you don't have to be strong all the time. Means someone's there when you break. I don't break. You're breaking right now, and that's okay. That's human. That's what makes you one of us instead of a weapon. The medical monitors had stopped alarming. Bryn's vitals were returning to normal, but something fundamental had shifted. Some wall she had built 3 years ago had developed its first crack. That evening, Team Alpha held a private ceremony in one of the facility's cleared areas outside the main buildings, away from the officers and analysts and bureaucrats who saw Bryn as an asset rather than a person. The 12 SEALs formed up in 2 lines, standing at attention in the fading jungle light. Merrick stood at the front, holding something wrapped in cloth. "Ms. Calloway," he said formally, "Team Alpha doesn't give these out lightly. In fact, we've only done this twice before in our unit's history. But what you did yesterday and today represents something beyond normal operational excellence. You saved 12 lives knowing it would compromise your position and potentially cost you your own life. You then saved 183 more people when you had every right to refuse. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a challenge coin. But this one was different from any Bryn had seen. Custom made, heavy, engraved with Team Alpha's insignia on one side. On the other side, a single word, Guardian. Below it, never alone. This represents more than gratitude, Merrick continued. It represents brotherhood, family, the kind of bond that only forms between people who have faced death together and came out the other side. You are one of us now. You might not wear the trident, but you've earned the respect that goes with it. Hooyah, the team said in unison, the traditional SEAL expression of affirmation. Bryn took the coin with hands that trembled slightly. She had received awards before, commendations, medals that came in official boxes with citations signed by people who had never met her. But this meant more than any of that. This was acceptance from warriors who understood, who had seen what she could do and still saw her as human rather than weapon. She tried to speak, to say something appropriate, but the words caught in her throat. 3 years of isolation, of pushing everyone away, of believing that distance was the only way to survive, had left her unprepared for this moment, for the feeling of belonging. I don't, she started, then stopped. Tried again. I don't deserve this. I got people killed 3 years ago. Morgan and her team. They died because I hesitated. And you saved us because you didn't, Keller said. That's called learning. That's called growth. Morgan's death taught you something important, and you used it to make sure we didn't end up like her. That honors her memory more than spending 3 years alone beating yourself up. But the 53 people I killed were armed combatants trying to kill Americans, Merrick interrupted. Every single one. You think any of us lose sleep over protecting our people? You think any of those fighters would have hesitated to kill you or us or those support staff at the firebase? This isn't murder. This is war. And in war, you did what warriors do. You protected your tribe. Bryn looked at the coin, then at the 12 faces watching her. 12 men who had seen her at her best and her worst. Who had watched her break down in the medical bay, but still stood here offering brotherhood. Thank you, she whispered. Then louder, finding her voice, Hooyah. The team's response was immediate and thunderous. Hooyah. They broke formation, gathering around her. Not touching, respecting boundaries, but present in a way that made the isolation of the past 3 years feel like a bad dream. Keller approached, his earlier skepticism completely gone. Ma'am, I need to apologize. When you first showed up, I thought there was no way one person could do what you did. Thought it was exaggeration or luck or something. But I watched you work. I saw the calculations you made, the discipline, the absolute focus. You're the real deal, and I'm honored to call you teammate. You saved my life when that fighter got close, Bryn said. Close quarters isn't my strength. I freeze up. If you hadn't been there, that's what pack means. You cover my weaknesses, I cover yours. Together, we're stronger than apart. 3 weeks later, Bryn stood in front of a weathered headstone in a small cemetery outside Bozeman, Montana. The stone was simple, honest, like the man it memorialized. Colonel Holland Calloway, U.S. Army Rangers, 1948-2020. Distance kept him alive but alone. She had chosen the inscription herself after his death 4 years ago. Had thought it was appropriate. Had thought it honored his choice to protect himself by pushing everyone away. Now she knew it was a warning she should have heeded differently. The Montana winter was brutal, wind cutting through her jacket despite the heavy wool. Snow covered the ground, pristine and white, unmarked, except for her footprints leading from the rental car to this plot. Bryn knelt in the snow, placing her damaged rifle from the firebase battle against the headstone. The scope was shattered from the RPG explosion. The stock cracked, but it had served her well in the moment she needed it most. Hey, Grandpa, she said quietly. I read your letter, the one Colonel Drake had, the one you wrote 2 months before you died. The wind carried her words away, but she continued anyway. You told them no, told the Guardian protocol you wouldn't be their weapon. And then you spent 40 years looking over your shoulder alone, carrying 89 faces that haunted you until the stress killed you. She pulled out the SEAL Challenge coin, heavy and real, in her hand. I thought you were right. Thought distance was survival. Thought isolation was strength. Spent 3 years after Morgan died proving I could do this alone. But I was wrong, you were wrong. Distance doesn't keep you alive. It keeps you safe, but safety isn't the same as living. You survived 40 years, but you never lived. Never trusted anyone. Never let anyone help carry the weight. She placed the challenge coin on the headstone next to the rifle. I became what you feared, what you warned me not to become. I'm carrying 53 faces now after just 2 days. I'll probably carry 100 more before this is over. But I'm not doing it alone. I found the pack you never did. Brothers who won't let me disappear, who make me stay human even when the work isn't. A memory surfaced. Her at 12 missing her first long-range shot by 6 inches. Her grandfather's hand on her shoulder. You're going to miss sometimes, kiddo. Everyone does. The question is whether you learn from it or let it define you. Distance keeps you alive, but connection makes life worth living. I forgot that. Don't you forget it. He had forgotten his own advice. Had let one bad mission, one loss, convince him that isolation was the only way. Bryn refused to make the same mistake. I'm going after Victor, she told the headstone. Going after his whole network. Drake's using me, but I'm using him right back. Using the Guardian Protocol's resources to protect the people I care about. The SEALs, their families, anyone Victor might target. And I'm not going as a ghost. I'm going with my pack. 12 operators who trust me and who I'm learning to trust back. We're going loud and visible, and we're going to end this threat the only way that works. She stood brushing snow from her knees. Watch over us, Grandpa. All of us, not just me, because I'm not alone anymore, and that makes me stronger than you ever were. The wind picked up swirling snow around the headstone. For just a moment, Bryn could swear she saw her grandfather in his dress uniform, standing at attention, saluting her. Then the vision faded, leaving only snow and stone, and the sense that something fundamental had been resolved. The plane touched down at Pope Army Airfield adjacent to Fort Bragg just after sunset. Team Alpha was waiting on the tarmac, 12 operators in civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of warriors. They had spent the last 3 weeks training together. Bryn teaching them advanced long-range techniques, them teaching her close-quarters battle skills she had always avoided, building the kind of coordination that only came from shared sweat and shared trust. Now they stood ready for what Colonel Drake had called a suicide mission with 40% odds of success. Bryn thought the odds were better than that because Drake's calculations didn't account for what happened when you combined her capabilities with 12 Navy SEALs who had learned to trust her completely. Keller approached carrying a long case. We built you something. Well, the team armorer built it. We supervised and made sure it had all the features you wanted. He opened the case, revealing a custom rifle. Accuracy International AXMC, like her previous one, but with upgrades. Better glass, improved trigger. Stock engraved with a name. Morgan Hale. Bryn ran her fingers over the engraving, feeling the letters. She was your team leader, right? Keller said. The one from Operation Sandstorm. Figured you'd want to carry her with you. Honor her memory by doing what she trained you to do. This is Bryn's voice caught. This is perfect, thank you. Thank the armorer, he did the work. We just told him what mattered. Merrick called the team to attention. All right, listen up. Wheels up in 18 hours. Final mission brief is in 30 minutes. But first I want to say something. He looked at each operator individually, then at Bryn. We've trained together for 3 weeks. We've learned each other's capabilities and limitations. We've built trust. But this mission is different from anything any of us have done. We're going into denied territory with minimal support, hunting a network that's had decades to establish itself. Victor Lazarev and his superior, this Maven character, they're professionals who've survived this long by being smarter and more careful than their enemies. The colonel gives us 40% odds. I think that's pessimistic, because he's calculating based on standard operational parameters. But there's nothing standard about this team. We've got the best long-range shooter any of us have ever seen, and she's teaching us to be force multipliers. We've got 12 operators with a combined 80 years of special operations experience, and we've got something Victor doesn't have. What's that, Chief? The youngest SEAL asked. We've got each other. We're pack, and pack doesn't leave pack behind. That gives us an edge no amount of planning or resources can match. Hoo-yah, the team responded. Merrick turned to Bryn. You've been alone for 3 years. You've proven you can survive that way. But you don't have to anymore. We've got your 6. Always. Question is, do you trust us? Bryn thought about Morgan Hale, about her grandfather, about 53 faces that were somehow easier to carry now that she wasn't carrying them alone. Yes, Chief, I trust you, all of you. And I'm honored to go into this fight with you. Then let's go hunting. The mission briefing was thorough and sobering. Victor Lazarev had fled to a fortress compound in the Caucasus Mountains. neutral territory where official U.S. military presence was prohibited. Intelligence suggested between 180 and 200 defenders, all professional fighters loyal to Victor and his network. The objective was simple in theory, impossible in practice. Infiltrate the compound. Eliminate Victor. Extract with intelligence on Maven's location and the broader network structure. This is a black operation, Drake said coldly. If you're captured, the U.S. will deny your existence. If you're killed, your families will be told you died in training accidents. There will be no medals, no recognition, no official acknowledgement that this mission ever happened. Standard terms for what we do, Merrick said. We're good. Drake pulled up satellite imagery of the fortress. It was impressive in its defensive capabilities. Multiple layers of security, clear killing fields, elevated positions for defenders, limited approach vectors. This is suicide, one of the intelligence officers muttered. No, Bryn said, studying the imagery. It's difficult. There's a difference. She pointed to specific features on the satellite image. These approaches have overlapping fields of fire, but they also have blind spots where the terrain creates dead zones. These defensive positions are elevated, but that makes them predictable. And this entire compound is built for defending against ground assault, not precision engagement from extreme range. You're suggesting what? Drake asked. Same tactic as before, but coordinated across 12 positions instead of one. We establish a perimeter at ranges between 800 and 1,200 meters. Create overlapping fields of fire that cover every approach and defensive position. Then we go loud. Force them to defend from all angles simultaneously. They can't effectively counterattack what they can't locate. Keller studied the imagery. That could work if we coordinate fire effectively, if we maintain discipline, if we trust each other to cover our sectors. We've trained for this, Bryn said, the past 3 weeks. This is exactly what we've been preparing for. Merrick nodded slowly. It's aggressive, it's risky, but it plays to our strengths. Victor expects us to come in quiet, try to infiltrate. Instead, we announce ourselves and turn his fortress into a shooting gallery where we control the engagement. And Maven, Drake asked, the intelligence we need. Victor will try to contact him when the assault starts. We intercept that communication. Track it. Maven becomes our next target. Drake considered this, then nodded. Approved. You have operational command, Chief Merrick. Ms. Calloway is your tactical advisor. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Bring me Victor Lazarev alive if possible, dead if necessary, and bring me Maven's location. That's the mission. Understood, sir. 18 hours later, a C-130 cargo plane lifted off from Pope Army Airfield, carrying 12 ghosts and 1 guardian into the darkness. Bryn sat near the rear ramp, checking her rifle for the dozenth time. Morgan Hale engraved on the stock. A reminder of why she did this work, why she carried the faces, why she had finally learned to trust again. Keller sat beside her, his own weapon across his lap. You ready for this? I'm never ready, but I'm never alone. Good answer. Merrick moved through the aircraft, checking on each operator, ensuring everyone was prepared. When he reached Bryn, he sat down across from her. What do you think our odds really are? Honestly, 60-40 in our favor if we execute perfectly, 30-70 if we make mistakes. Victor's good. His compound is well defended. But he's never faced 12 coordinated shooters at this skill level before. And if things go wrong, then we adapt, improvise, do what SEALs do best. And if it comes down to it, we make sure the mission succeeds even if we don't make it out. Maven's location is the priority. Victor's network has to be stopped. Drake would approve of that calculus. Drake can go to hell. I'm not doing this for him or his guardian protocol. I'm doing it for Morgan, for my grandfather, for every person who would suffer if we let Victor's network continue operating. And I'm doing it with brothers who make me better than I could ever be alone. Merrick smiled. You know, 3 weeks ago you were a ghost who didn't trust anyone. Now you're talking about brothers and pack and fighting for something bigger than survival. Morgan used to say I was stronger in a pack. Took me 3 years and 53 kills to finally believe her. Better late than never. The aircraft banked, beginning its descent toward the insertion point. The loadmaster gave the 10-minute warning. The team stood checking gear, preparing for the jump that would put them on the ground in the Caucasus Mountains. Bryn looked at each face, memorizing them, knowing that some might not make it back, that this could be the last time they were all together. Hey, Keller said, reading her expression. None of that. We all come back. That's the deal. Pack doesn't leave pack behind. Right, sorry, just thinking about what comes after. After we win, you mean? After we eliminate Victor, find Maven, and dismantle this network. Then what? Then we find the next threat, the next Victor, because there's always another one, always someone who needs stopping. And we're the ghosts who can do it without the bureaucracy or politics getting in the way. Sounds like a purpose. Sounds like a life. First real one I've had in 3 years. The Loadmaster gave the 30-second warning. The rear ramp began to open, revealing the night sky and mountains below. Bryn stood rifle secured, ready to jump into darkness with her pack beside her. She thought about her grandfather's final words, about finding the pack he never did, about not dying alone. She had found them. 12 brothers who had given up their identities, their lives, their futures to stand beside her. And together they were about to prove that ghosts were the most dangerous operators on any battlefield. The Loadmaster pointed to the green light. Time to jump. Bryn took one last look at the team. Then she smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since Morgan's death, she felt complete. Ready? Merrick asked. Never ready, but never alone. Hoo-yah. Hoo-yah. They jumped into darkness, at 12 ghosts and 1 guardian falling toward a fortress where Victor Lazarev waited, unaware that the hunt was about to end. The aircraft disappeared into the night sky, leaving no evidence of their presence except the wind and the stars. Below in the mountains, a legend was about to be born. The Guardian and her pack, never alone, never defeated, always protecting, always hunting, always ghosts, always human. The end of one story, the beginning of another.